Yeah, you're tiny. It's like one of Megan's photos, isn't it? Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Well, you shouldn't slouch. Now you're bigger. Now I'm bigger. The mystery is, why is Amanda Gorman so tiny compared to Megan? Anyway, this video is not about that. I did a video the other night all about Helen Bland. You have to speak up in this room because I've noticed the
It's a little bit echoey, darling.
It is a bit, isn't it? Yeah, I did a video about Helen Bland. Remember my lovely old teacher who went yapping to the press. Anyway, this morning I was watching Daniel Boland. And
he's funny. I like that.
He is funny. He's funny, and he uses great big long words, doesn't he? That we haven't got a clue what he's saying. I have to go and look them up. But he's fabulous. And it got me thinking, because he said in a previous video that he is an English teacher. Now I don't know if he really is, or that was just a joke. But I wish he was. Daniel, you should be a teacher if you're not, because if you'd been one of my teachers, I would have paid attention, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
A lot of the YouTubers.
Yeah, instead of switching off and thinking of aeroplanes and other things.
Yeah, or why am I here? When will this torture end? But then I thought, perhaps I had been a little bit unfair to St.Marys Hall. I know it doesn't exist anymore.
It's a bit late now.
I do hope it wasn't something I said. But I did have good teachers and nice teachers at St.Marys Hall, and I wanted to do some justice to them. And I will use their real names. I hope it doesn't damage their careers forever. I doubt it, because they're probably in their 80s or 90s by now. But just the thought, oh, you worked at St.Marys Hall? Dun, 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 you'll never work again. This is going to be quite a long one, actually. And feel free to pitch in if you had any nice teachers. I know you didn't like any of your teachers, did you?
There were a few.
There were a few. Good.
None spring to mind.
Well, the reason
I'm sure there was.
That Daniel got me thinking about this is he was doing, I think it was the Austen sisters or the Brontes. See, I wasn't paying attention that much, but it just got me thinking. I suddenly started thinking the importance of being earnest. Now,
handbag?
A handbag? It's a great film, and I emphasise film here because, as I have mentioned more than once, I didn't learn to read and write properly, extensively, until I was 19, and I learned to type. And I learned to copy type, and I would copy type from magazines and newspapers. And when I found a word I didn't know or understand, I'd look it up. And that's how my diction improved, and my vocabulary, basically. It was nothing to do with St.Marys Hall. No thanks to them whatsoever. So my first thanks is to Mrs. Hook. I don't know if she's still alive. Mrs. Hook did not work at St.Marys Hall. She worked at Kingscliff, which was my first school. Headmistress Mrs. Raxter. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Raxter. She was quite an unconventional character. Oddly enough, she phoned my mum up when she saw the thing in the newspaper about Helen Bland and said, what a bloody cheek, that woman talking to the newspapers. Mrs. Raxter it was quite a small school, Kingscliff, and she was really unconventional. In fact, when I was in the top year with her, the youngest child was 6 years old because he was a protege, and the oldest, I think, was about 16. She didn't care. She put all ages together, depending on their intellect, and she gave us personal attention, and she was a big fan of the Empress Josephine and Napoleon and all that. She bought all their love letters and stuff.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, she was big into that and fluent in French, which I'm not. But Miss Hook worked for her, and Miss Hook taught me to swim, and it was Miss Hook who noticed I couldn't read and write, and I needed extra attention, and she got me up to the speed of very basic reading and writing. So thank you, Mrs. Hook. No one really took it from there until I learned to type.
Don't you just love a private school education?
Oh, awful. Now, the other thing is, and I don't talk about my sisters in these videos, but the comparison has been drawn that I have two older sisters who've not led unconventional lives like me. And, you know, why was I the difficult one? Well, I've thought about it a lot over the years, and my education was completely different to both my sisters. And so was my upbringing, because my mother became a politician when I was 5. She was a stay-at-home mum with both my sisters. I'm not criticising her for that. Both my sisters went to Brighton and Hove High School for their first school. I went for the entry, I passed, but they didn't have a place. So my father said, well, let's put her in Kingscliff, which was really different to Brighton and Hove High. And then I went to St.Marys Hall, same as both my sisters, but The first year I was there, I had the same headmistress as them. I had Mrs. Leslie, who was full of fun, full of life and colour, and wanted children to enjoy school and get out there in the world and explore. She retired after my first year there, and everything changed from there. We had a fantastic chemistry teacher. I mean, he really awakened my interest in chemistry and science and blowing things up. And
was he called Doc Gilbert?
No, he wasn't. I can't actually remember his name, but he retired. As soon as Mrs. Leslie left, he retired. He was like Professor Unwin. We had a lovely school Reverend Holden, who was really kind and lovely and didn't ram religion down our throats at all, but got us exploring. He retired and was replaced by Satan's seed. I won't name the guy because I'm pretty sure he is still alive.
Why not?
No, I won't. Because it's rude, it's mean, and it's wrong. Is that a B?
No,
anyway, the reverend that he was replaced with he used to say things to us like, remember when you're sinning, even when you're on the toilet, God is watching you when you're on the toilet. And as a kid I was like, oh my God, really?
You'll get me started.
Oh my, okay. I mean, as a kid I thought, why would God be interested in me having a wee? What's he talking about? And from then on, I was convinced that everything in thin air was God watching me, and I became quite paranoid. Don't know about the other girls. He was horrible. He was really horrible. He was quite an evil man. And I think he had a big influence on the spirituality of the school. There were loads of really great teachers that just retired as soon as Mrs. Leslie left, and she was replaced by a lady called Miss Harvey. Now, Miss Harvey, I thought, was a really sweet lady. I liked her. She wore her degree robes everywhere she went. She had grey skin, grey hair. She sort of wafted down the corridor like you couldn't see her feet, just ooh, you know, just like a ghost, the ghost of the school. She was very colourless. She was very shy. She was not interested. She was withdrawn, literally like a ghost. And the teachers that were bad just played merry hell. And there was a bit of a war, I got the impression, between the good teachers and the bad teachers. And it was a catastrophe. In fact, I was made to sit next to Miss Harvey sometimes as a punishment at lunchtime, which I didn't find a punishment at all. I thought she was really nice. She did eat an apple with a knife and fork, which is quite a skill, and fascinated me. But she was polite conversation and stuff, and then after she finished, ooh, she'd just leave. So my nice teachers, and coming back to the importance of being earnest, I learned all about that from the movie, not the book. I wasn't taught that at school. It's a great film. I'm sure it's a great book as well, if you can read and write. But I do not attribute thanks to St.Marys Hall whatsoever for anything. It was a complete rip-off. It was just a fraud scam, ripping my dad off, who went to an early grave with stress and debt. The nice teachers, Miss Stringer. I really like Miss Stringer. She wasn't one of my teachers, but we went on a school trip to Hadrian's Wall, and she was great fun, and I really liked her, and I saw another side to her. Miss Morgan was one of my classics teachers, and she did make classics an interesting subject, although I struggled. I really, really struggled. Miss Bristol, my form mistress, she was fabulous. And she stuck up for us girls when we were being picked on by the worst teachers. I've done Miss Harvey. There was a lady who taught French. I think she was called Mrs. White. Can't remember. Very attractive lady. I liked her. And no, I can't speak French. But I do remember things like Je suis, tu as, il a, elle a, because she got us to chant it over and over and over again. And I can say things like Je ne parle français. When I went to Lewis Priory after I ran away, I had a maths teacher called Mr. White, no relation to Mrs. White, and he was fantastic. I had a boyfriend who was into playing darts, and you've got to be quite good at maths for darts. So I really, really liked Mr. White, but by the time I went to Lewis Priory, I was just bunking off, and I was a lost cause, quite frankly. Mr. Rosa was my English, my music teacher at St.Marys Hall. He was an absolute sweetie. I really liked him. And I'd like to say a big sorry to Mr. McCullum for all the drawing pins that we put upside down on your chair. It wasn't so much that we found it funny that you sat on them every single time you fell for it. It was the fact that you didn't check your chair before you sat down. I don't know if you liked it or not, but if he's still alive, I am sorry. He was a very, very nice man. And if I've missed anybody else who might pop up and say, well, hang on, we used to get on quite well. I did get on well with a lot of the teachers, but equally there were a lot that absolutely hated me, especially around that Christmas fair thing. So, learning about things, one of my sisters used to say to me, don't watch the TV too much, your eyes will go square. And loads of grown-ups would say that, but if I hadn't watched TV, I really wouldn't have a fucking clue what's going on today. I pieced it all together, mostly from American imports. I thought that where Samantha Stevens lived in Bewitched was one part of America where they all dressed like the 1960s. And when I saw the film Bonnie and Clyde, I thought, that's another part of America where they dress like more old-fashioned. And the cowboy films, I thought, there must be places in America where they dress like cowboys. And I sort of pieced it together that there was something history and something to do with time, and Doctor Who helped me understand about history and time and visiting different places. So my education largely came from the TV. In fact, I remember learning the English language. I know this is going to sound bizarre, and I've asked my kids and I've asked Graham, and they did not have the same experience or memory. But I remember looking at all the grown-ups when I was really little, and they'd and I didn't know what they were saying. And then I watched things like Play School with Floella Benjamin, who, by the way, just got another decoration from the Queen. I can't believe how young that woman looks. It's like she never ages. And I have Floella Benjamin on Play School. Which window shall we look through today, boys and girls? I used to love that. And Big Ted. Interestingly enough, Trisha Goddard was also a presenter on Play School, and I remember her. And I remember as a little one not liking her and thinking, this woman doesn't want to be here, whereas Floella made the teddy bears, Big Ted and Little Ted, she made them come to life. So I remember watching Play School and Big Ted, and I'd think, oh, I understand that word. And it was like an alien language. And then once I got to understand all of what Floella was saying, I started watching Play Away, which was the next level up. And again, oh, I heard a word there, I understand. And I actually remember learning the English language that way. Learning Spanish, if not being able to read and write at the age of 18 isn't bad enough, when I was on the run and we were living in Spain, I thought I've got to learn Spanish. So that's where I began to learn Spanish. And I couldn't understand what the man on the tape was saying to me in English because I didn't know what a demonstrative adjective was. I thought, what the hell are you talking about? Or the definite article. And it drove me crazy because I didn't understand the English language. I do speak a modicum of Spanish now because we live in Spain. I do speak Spanish. But learning it, I gave up learning it the proper, way of... I didn't even know what a pronoun was until everybody started kicking off about being called them, their, they and us and all that sort of thing. Honestly, I didn't know what a pronoun was. I knew what verbs were, because remember Mrs. Dennis saying, they're doing words. Keep it simple for kids. They're doing words. Oh, okay, like running, walking. Yes, okay. I wasn't quite sure what an adjective was until I was 22. So, St Mary's Hall, as a Board of Governors, it must have had a Board of Governors, presumably. What the hell were you thinking, putting a lady like Miss Harvey, one of the most uninspirational human beings, very sweet, very kind, but utterly useless. What were you thinking? And charging those parents so much money. Now, I'll admit that I was the dunce of the school, and I'm sure I was alone in struggling, and everybody else went on to dizzying heights. But really, as schools go, obviously could read by the time I was on the run, reading in the newspaper, oh, she fell from grace. She was honoured to go to, privileged to go to a private. I just thought, fuck off. You don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, there's my rant for the day, and I hope that I have named all the teachers that I was supposed to. Yes, I think I did. They were lovely people. Lovely, and I know being a teacher must be a very frustrating and very difficult job. But you've got to be able to inspire the people that you're teaching, or you're never going to get anywhere. And the homework, oh, I had to carry kilos and kilos and kilos of books around with me. And it'd be like, oh, just, I don't know, write 16 essays of no less than 1,000 words each. Think about that, anyone who works for a newspaper or is a journalist. Journalist given a story, I want an article produced, 1,000 words. Could you knock that up in 20 minutes? Really? Because that's what we were expected to do at St.Marys Hall. And I just drowned in a sea of falling behind. I didn't know what the hell to do. And I got detention a lot because I hadn't done the homework. And actually, homework is... I don't agree with homework because I think that puts a lot of pressure on the kids. And the teaching should happen during class hours with the teacher. I'm sorry, that is the way it should be. And I also think the whole education system largely needs ripping down and starting all over again. I think that people are just trained to be law-abiding taxpayers, learn to sit in rows, learn to put the hand up to ask to go to the toilet, things like that. They're training them up for Victorian factories. In fact, I will put a link in the description to this of a wonderful movement that me and both my kids are very much in support of. Go away, mosquito. A guy who raps and he sums up the whole problem of education today. Now, if any of you guys loved being at school, that's fantastic. That is fantastic, and perhaps I am in the minority. I don't think so, because I think a lot of kids these days, they don't know about wars, they don't know about boundaries, and that's how we're now arriving in a society that's got things so messed up and back to front that they believe that our royal family and monarchy and institution is a bad thing, and it's all the evil British Empire, and they are not looking at other terrible things that have happened from other countries. I don't know. What do you guys think? I could talk about this subject all day long, and it does incense me. I'd love to meet up with any of my old teachers if they're still alive and just say what the hell was going on there. Anyway, as always, thoughts, opinions, and if you don't already check him out, check out Daniel Boland. He's marvellous. Thank you for listening.